alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to this edition of the Reverts Show. Today we'll be discussing the plight of the reverts and why perhaps so many reverts stop practicing the religion of Islam. Leon, I have a few questions for you. What has been your experience speaking to reverts, how they have engaged the community and their experiences? And you've also published a paper on titled Performing Authentic Muslimness, and addresses this idea that Muslims or reverts, when they become Muslim, they actually attempt to prove their Muslimness to born Muslims, that they need to acquire, for example, an Islamic name, to wear hijab, to grow a beard, and they have to be seen to be very knowledgeable. They have to be able to defend the faith very early on.
Yes, that's right. So basically what I found, one of the things I found in the research that I did was that, you know, when a person converts to Islam, and this probably applies to people who convert to different religions, you know, you might think that it's kind of all about the relationship the person has with God or with themselves. But what I found, and maybe this is because I'm a sociologist, so I'm interested in the relationship between different people, is that what's really important for people is that they have their conversion or their religious identity kind of ratified or confirmed or accepted by the Muslim community. So it's often not enough for somebody to say, I've converted to Islam, I believe in God, I worship God, and I'm satisfied. People want the Muslim community, who is supposed to be their community, to accept them and accept the identity that they claim to have as a Muslim. And you know, as you said, I found that there are many ways in which people, you know, make big efforts really to engage with the Muslim community and to show them that it's not a fad, or it's not a joke, it's not something they're taking lightly. It's been a huge decision and a massive change, and it means a lot to them. And they want to really show this because, as I say, they want people to appreciate their conversion for what it is, that which is something very meaningful and very deep for them. Because some people might dismiss converts as, you know, like we said, just doing it because it's something maybe that people think is fashionable, or because it's maybe something people think they get advantages from it, or people might think that sometimes people might dismiss converts as spies for, you know, MI5 or something like that. So a lot of Muslim converts, they want to show, you know, it's none of those things. It's just because I really deeply believe in the tenets of Islam. And so one example, as you mentioned, is that, you know, some people who convert to Islam say that they choose a Muslim name, not because they believe that Allah wants them to do that, because it's Islamically required from them, but because if they don't have a Muslim name, lifelong Muslims struggle to relate to them. So the adoption of a Muslim name for some reverts is less about worship, it's less about doing it for the sake of Allah, and it's more about doing it for the sake of the Muslim community, just to accept them. And this even comes with, you know, clothing, for example. Some people who I've spoken to have said that their choice of clothing and the way that they use so-called Islamic clothing, sometimes it's cultural clothing, in a way where they can perform their Muslimness and just show people that I'm not just saying I'm a Muslim, I really deeply believe it, and I'll do whatever it takes to convince you of that.
Yeah. And how would the experiences of those that have adopted the Islamic garb and those that haven't compare? Can you give any examples of how they're treated differently?
Well, it's really interesting because, you know, I met people who've converted to Islam who nobody knows they're a Muslim because they don't wear a headscarf. So one lady I can think of, she doesn't wear a headscarf and she works on the checkout at Tesco in a predominantly Muslim area. And none of the customers who are passing by know she's a Muslim. And she was telling me how, you know, they go by and to her, they're her brothers and sisters. They're people that she feels like a lot of compassion towards. But she said that a lot of the times they're disrespectful to her. They don't even say hello to her. They don't say thank you. They don't respect her in a way where they might have if she was actually a Muslim. And her experience for me, it makes us think really about the many, you know, the great number of reverts that live in the UK, for example, who Muslims are passing on a day-to-day basis, and they don't know that that's their brother and sister. Or there might be somebody who maybe is not even a Muslim, but who's looking into Islam, maybe knows more about Islam than the lifelong Muslim, or, you know, the person who's working in the street. And I think that is something really to think about, because it really changes how you actually deal with non-Muslims or people you perceive as a non-Muslim. So those Muslim converts who are not visible as Muslims are even more invisible than those Muslim converts who do appear as a Muslim. So some people in some literature, they've described Muslim converts as invisible Muslims. They said that in the Muslim community there are Muslims who are invisible, like Somalis, for example, who are rarely spoken about when Muslims are spoken about. And reverts have been considered as one of the invisible communities. But amongst reverts, there's another even more invisible, if we can say such a thing, set of Muslims, which are those ones who do not appear to be Muslim, but who are just as sincere or devout in their belief, just as maybe God-fearing or just as knowledgeable in many cases.
Yeah. Can I just ask, how many invisible Muslims think there are, and what percentage of the revert population would you consider invisible? Could you put an estimate on it?
It's hard to say because they're invisible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to answer because sometimes reverts are in between the two or going backwards and forwards. You know, as you've spoken about the headscarf, some reverts, you know, grapple with that, as do lifelong Muslim women as well, actually. Sometimes they wear it, sometimes they don't wear it, sometimes they go through periods of wearing it, sometimes, you know, they decide to take it off. There's another lady I can think of, a different lady, who, when I met her, was, you know, said, I mean, she was quite an elderly lady who'd converted to Islam, so she was aware that when you reach a certain age, it's not expected even for you to wear a headscarf, but she wanted to wear it. But she spoke about a great anxiety that she had because she wasn't sure how people were going to respond, both non-Muslims and lifelong Muslims. And eventually she decided to wear a headscarf, and she set herself a kind of deadline of when she was going to do it, and she did it. And within the first few days, she had some really challenging experiences and difficult ones that she found really upsetting, that made her actually remove her headscarf. So it's hard to say anyway how many people are visible as Muslims and how many are not. But I think it's sufficient to say that there are a significant number of people who've converted to Islam who you don't know are Muslim because they don't have those visible symbols of being a Muslim.
And what about...
Hannah, excuse me, could I just add something? It's really
Please.
interesting what Leon is sharing. You know, the invisible Muslims. For example, in prisons, the prison population of Muslims is gone up. It's ridiculous how high that is. Also, the amount of males, at least, who are taking shahada in prison, it's a very big number, a really high number. Okay, many of them are able to practice Islam in prison quite easily because they don't have necessarily the problems outside that got them in jail in the first place.
Yeah.
They have time to think and question what they were doing and who they are. This is really important. I also want to add that on the census that happened last, so many of the Muslims I know who have converted or they're reverts, what I found is most of them the ones who haven't changed their name by deed poll, they didn't say they were Muslim. I mean, this last census has happened at the height of Muslims are the enemy type of thing. Who's going to tell the government, yeah, I'm a Muslim, right, officially for you forever to know me? The vast majority of them didn't put they were Muslim.
Why do you think that is? What are they afraid of?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, you've got, okay, it might sound like out there, but people do have fears of things like Guantanamo Bay and getting picked up by the police or having your emails read or being, you know, the finger of suspicion is firmly planted at the Muslims, and demonization of Muslims around the world is happening at a time when Allied forces are in the Middle East and they're fighting and they're dominating and they're doing all different things. And this has not been the past 2 years, it's been going on for decades, especially, really, it's been going on from 1991 with the first Gulf War, okay? CNN made its name through that time, and 24-hour rolling news blew up from 1991 and it hadn't stopped. So there's these things, and there's the fact that lots of people who are not Muslims are scared of what they perceive Islam to be. So that's caused a lot of women to not wear hijab, and that's caused a lot of Muslim men to not be visibly Muslim. You know, 2011, I believe, and this could be for other years as well, what was seen as racial assaults in like Europe was the highest in Britain. And I think that a lot of these racial, and this is the ones that were registered, you know, a lot of these assaults were on a lot of Muslim women being abused because they got hijabs on and things, and even the fact that Sikh men, they thought they were Muslim, and, you know. So there's just tons of reasons why people will try to be more invisible, and most of it is a feeling of self-preservation and not wanting to put your head up to be whack-a-mole, you know, like this. And yeah, I just needed to mention that thing about the thing about not just prison, but also, let's say, inner city youth. I sometimes work out in a gym. The amount of guys in there who are Muslim who come and give me salams, yeah, who you would never have known that they are Muslim. It's even shocking to me. And then you've got a new generation of young men who are rocking big sunnah beards, right? And you're like, Assalamu alaikum. They're like, sorry, brother, man, I'm not a Muslim, you know. I'm like, dude, I can't wear that beard. All my brethren are Muslim and they're wearing beards, so I'm wearing a beard, you know. So this is really trying to get these numbers of the invisible Muslims is incredibly difficult, but I would say it's a lot more than people think. And to me, it's a vast potential of good people who, if they are addressed correctly, become a boon for this country. They become a great thing for our society and the future. But if people demonize the youth, I mean, if you think back not too long ago, teenagers were the big problem, you know, teenagers. It wasn't true. Always when you're a teenager, you got some idiots. If newspapers are going to sell on the back of the few idiots to tarnish everyone else, but if you're a teenager, you can't hide, you can't be invisible. But the Muslim can choose to be invisible if it saves them Islamophobic reactions and all other things like this.
It's very interesting, Khalil. These invisible Muslims, you've known quite a few Muslims that have actually stopped practicing, withdrawn from the community. Would you consider these invisible Muslims the same as those that have withdrawn, become very introspective?
Yes and no, because it's like what Dr. Musai was saying. You have people go through the phases of practicing and not practicing. You know, we're human beings. Humans swing between poles, you know. We have up days and down days. It's normal. When people are going through those swings of practicing and they're not practicing, I don't think they should be condemned. They should be listened to. They should be helped and supported. That doesn't really happen. You have a lot more times somebody's not practicing and you've got others who will condemn them. They're not on the path no more, Rabbi. It's ridiculous, okay? But in answering that thing about invisible ones, even people who say, I'm not a Muslim anymore, I can't take it, I can't handle the Muslims anymore, I'm not a Muslim anymore. And then you say to them, oh, wow, so you don't believe in God anymore? Well, yeah, I love God. Okay, do you still believe the Prophet Muhammad was real and existed? Of course. What about the Quran? Well, I still read my Quran. Yeah. So, and what about, do you pray? They're like, yeah, I pray in my way, I do my thing. So, although they're saying that they're not Muslim anymore, it really is a disassociation with Muslims that they've encountered and that residue that's been left from those encounters. Not a disconnect from Allah and the Prophet. And they want that because many people who took Shahada, there's many people that realize that this connection to God actually saved them. That's why it's such a wonderful thing. And that's why it's so bad when they knock up against people that kind of tarnish that connection. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Many people become Muslim. They're like innocents. They're like innocent people. They're in a state of purity and a state of change. And they can be easily damaged, and that damage can be profound and great. But it has to be those environments, and those institutions, and those people who are available for them in the best way. That's where we're lacking a bit.
Thank you, Khalil. You haven't been a Muslim long, and you're already struggling with some issues like hijab. How do you feel you could move forward do you have any idea what you would need to progress and really develop a sustainable faith?
I have a sustainable faith in God. That's not the issue here at all. Let's be very clear about that. With a hijab or no hijab, in a bikini or in a garbage bag over my head, I am the same person praying to the same God. So for me, the whole issue of clothing and hijab and, am I wearing a long skirt or a short skirt, yes, we're in a society where we dress appropriately for that society, of course. But I mean, I'm way so even for me, the hijab issue is like, why am I even, why is this isn't a problem for me. I've given very clear reasons as to why I will not wear this in my society in the West at this date, because like you say, maybe in 7th century Medina and Mecca, things were very different. And I'm not saying, I would like every woman on the planet to be able to choose what she wears. She wants to wear a niqab in London. That doesn't offend me. If a woman wants to wear 6 hijabs, I would support that. I would fight for that. I would fight for the woman to wear the niqab if she so feels. But I will also fight for the right to use my intellect to question the validity of things that are just blindly thrown and to be accepted by a woman who I consider myself, a woman with a functioning intellect as good as a man. I don't see the difference. So I'm happy to be an invisible Muslim. I guess that's what I am. I'd never heard that statement. Indeed I am, and I'm proud to be one. I would like to be judged by my fellow human on who I am, the actions I take in the world. Am I who I claim to be? Are you disappointed in me when you get to know me, or do I live up to the words I say? Do I care for my fellow human being? Do I look at all human beings and embrace them with the same love, no matter what they're wearing, what colour they are? That is who I aspire to be as a human being. So will I one day wear the hijab and say I'm a Muslim and wave the flag as I walk down the street? Maybe I will, I don't know. Right now that's completely irrelevant. Would I wear the hijab in Saudi Arabia? Of course. Would I find out the dress code of that country before I went and make sure I had the appropriate clothing? Of course I would. I'm not here to upset or act like a revolutionary, rebel. No, I respect the right of every human being on the planet to determine themselves and who they are and their connection to God and to each other. And that's what I was hoping to discover in Islam, is that I would be taught how to be a warrior, a spiritual warrior, and that I would be able to stand and say, as a woman, I can be representative of the faith of Islam in all my femininity. And all I'm saying is I'm coming up against some real boundaries with this, which make me think, why should I be the symbol of controversy when I could just be a Christian and do exactly what I'm doing in my life? Exactly the same work. My work doesn't change, my writing doesn't change, my attitude, my love, where I see my future in the world. I don't understand, so this is where my confusion about the whole thing is.
Okay, again, it sounds like you have some expectations of Muslims, of the Muslim community, that are not being fulfilled. You speak of education, that you could be taught to be a strong woman. What do you think is missing? Can you pinpoint what you think you need to become the best Muslim you can? Is something from individuals or institutions?
I think I need time. I need everyone to back off with their opinions about who I should be and what I should wear and how and who and what and why and when, and this one said it 1,000 years ago and that one. I mean, give me a break, really. Let me come to Islam in the way that is true and honest, which is the person I am, and let me show you who I am. Let me bring my attributes. Let me show you my strength, my qualities. And then we can see what we can do with them. But to say, in order to walk through this gate, I'm going to make it so difficult for you and I'm going to kick you a few times, and I'm going to whack you around the head with some really painful issues, and then maybe we'll open the door for you to come in when I've come with a pure heart, and all I'm seeking is nearness to God. You know, there's a point where you get to the gate, you go, hang on, I've banged on this gate a lot, my knuckles are bleeding, you know, the hijab is like, is it on, what's the deal here, you know? And you go to the other gate because the Christians are standing there going, come back, we love you. You don't have to wear a hijab, you don't have to change your name, you don't have to do anything. You just have to accept that God is love. Love. That is why I'm here. It's love. And sometimes I feel that if true love is understanding, it's opening, it's saying, I don't agree with this, you threaten me, but you know what? I'm going to open my heart to you, and I'm going to let that fear come in, and I'm going to connect with you, whoever you are.
You know, that what you described, even as you spoke about the Christians and the door is open and it's love, you know, that also is Islam, and it's what we were speaking about before. The problem are the obstacles that people with their whims and attitudes and their nafs and their own desire to dominate, to say, I'm righter than you, you're going to do things my way, all of that stuff. It's pride, it's arrogance, it's misunderstanding, it's the need to dominate. You understand? These are the problems. And for example, not just for women, but especially for women, now it still exists, but a few decades ago it was much worse in the workplace. Forget religion, yeah? These type of people, they're there, and they are part of our existence in this world, and maybe in our lives we have been those people too. And these are some of the things that we, one, have to learn to recognize and see, no, I don't need that. You know, even the statement, La ilaha illallah, you know, there's nothing worthy of worship or obedience except for Allah. La ilaha illallah. If you split it up, it's a negation and an affirmation. La ilaha, no, I say no to that. And then, other than Allah, I have an affirmation of that absolute. To me, this is a blueprint of our life. We encounter things, and we're either going to accept or we're going to say no to it. And we learn as we go through this life what things to say yes to, what things to say no to. Other people try to tell us which things is yes and which things is no, and then we have to also learn, how do I navigate those other people? Because my absolute goal really is that love, that divine, all, absolute love. And I know that Allah says in the Quran, do you believe that you will be left alone, untested, after you say you believe? So that's another one of those things in our life in this world, that we will be given tests. Tests are so that we can see that result and know what we know, or know where we are in a particular subject, or we have an exam. And there's the test of our life's existence, and we have it every moment, and we learn from it. And it's not only Muslims that can teach people things. It's everything that exists. If we know how to read it, we can learn from it, and we can grow from it, and we could be better for it. And
Khalil, I'd like to ask this final question that I've asked Kate. How do you think we could improve the Muslim community? How could we move forward and address these issues we've spoken about? Because you have 25 years of experience behind you.
Yeah.
Do you see a solution? Can you envision something new?
The main thing that I think is that we have to create and build our own institutions that are not exclusive but inclusive. But they have to reflect our experiences and every one of us has immense value. And that value has to be put in the pot with everyone else, and we have to establish and create something that is wholesome and holistic, and that reflects who and what we are and what we've experienced and where we're heading. I think the person who Allah guides to the path is a renewed beacon of light. And that light has to be joined with the other lights and has to illuminate everything else. And we have to establish that. We have to build things and put things into place for that to happen. That's the only way I see it going on.
God willing.
God willing.
Sue, the same question to you. How do you feel we could move forward and improve on the current situation?
It's more of those practical aspects. So it's confusing enough on the spiritual side and on the research in Islam, but the practical steps of how to conduct yourself and how to conduct yourself at home doing your normal day-to-day things and being Muslim. Many of us have got quite different lives now. We might not be able to go to the cinema because the films are quite explicit. We can't go to clubs because of the drinking side. If we go to friend's house, we have to counteract the halal, haram alcohol. So it's helping people to adjust to these practical aspects, and that you can still be yourself, you can still have your own character, you can still live a fun life, do many of the things that you used to do before, but just maybe in a slightly different way, helping you to live with Islam.
Thank you. And finally, Leon, as a researcher that's interviewed many reverts, what do you think the needs are? How can we move forward?
I think first of all we have to put ourselves in place, to be honest with you, and we have to remember that we as individual humans, we don't have the ability to force people to convert to Islam or either to force them to remain a Muslim. To some extent it's out of our hands. Allah guides whom He wills, and there is a responsibility with each individual to decide the path that they take. But that's not to say that we shouldn't make efforts to support those people who do revert to Islam or who are interested in learning about Islam. I think the solution is really not from somebody like me to make recommendations. The solution is from Islam itself, because Islam provides all the answers about how you should be as a person when dealing with people of the same faith and of different faiths. And that's just all the common sense things that we know Islam teaches, such as being hospitable, being understanding, removing that pride and that arrogance that we heard about earlier, and just trying to be more understanding and friendly towards those people who convert to Islam. Simple things like inviting people to your house for dinner, socialising with them, being a good friend, listening to whatever issues that they're dealing with, trying to advise them, trying to check your own prejudices that you have, and whether you're the type of person who is mistreating Muslim converts, can all go a long way in not only helping converts but in helping yourself as well.
Okay, so you feel like it's an individual change. Muslims need to check their own behaviour, and
I think a big important priority that we must have as Muslims is always to improve our own character, because that's going to be what's going to assist us to overcome a lot of the problems. I mean, there are already organisations and people doing collective efforts to support reverts, which is a good thing, but I'm also cautious of efforts to take converts out of the Muslim community with very unique services and very special treatment, because I worry that further alienates reverts from the Muslim community in general. So I'm not saying that these efforts are wrong and shouldn't be undertaken, because there's great value in them, but I think that there must also be efforts from reverts and from the lifelong Muslim community as well to incorporate and include reverts into the main part of the mosque and the main organisations, not just in specific organisations that are just for reverts. So, I think one thing that kind of shocked me when I realised it was that the debate that we have, is it convert or revert? The reason that we have this debate is because there's no Islamic Arabic word for revert or convert that we can refer back to get a correct translation, because in Islamic philosophy or Islamic ontology, there is no such category as revert. There is just Muslims. There is, maybe people who have more taqwa, or people who are hypocrites, or people who engage in wrongdoing. But there's no category of people in Islamic thinking which is called new Muslim or which is called revert. It's just a Muslim. A Muslim is a Muslim. So the more organisations we create specifically for reverts, I worry that we enforce this idea that there is a separate type of people who are not really part of our community, who are a community in themselves. And ideally, I hope that we can see at a time when Muslims treat each other in the Islamic way, which is as brothers and sisters, as one community, without making these distinctions and judgments based on race or gender or new Muslim, old Muslim heritage and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Leon. That's very interesting. One last question. Khalil, you've actually co-founded an organisation called Prog Reverts Community. This is an organisation that aims to support reverts, although I understand you are inclusive.
Yes.
What do you feel now after hearing Leon's opinion about revert organisations, or those organisations that separate themselves from the mainstream community?
I think the first thing I'd like to say briefly is that what Leon said about historically, you're just a Muslim, you become a Muslim. I lived in Damascus for over a year, and everybody knew I was a Brit, but everybody accepted me as a Muslim. They didn't ask if they did ask me have I always been a Muslim, and I said I was a Christian before, it just gave me more brownie points. Okay, I didn't have any alienation like that. I would go to I would go to the zikr circles with the Sufis. I would pray in the Jum'ah in the Sunnis. I would go to the shrines of the Shia. I would talk with the Alawis and Druze and everyone, Christians, everything. So I was totally accepted in Syria for being who I am. So the identity wasn't happening. The labels wasn't important. As far as what Dr. Musawi has said in regards to the possible problems of trying to make institutions for Muslims which is outside of the rest of the main thing, it's very true. Because if some of those people who have established big mosques and centres decide, oh, we're going to give you a little thing on the side, it may well be just that little thing on the side. We tolerate you in a little place here, go on, do your little thing. If on the other hand, they recognise the abilities and the qualities of these people that's come to the path, and they say, yes, we can see in 5 years or in 10 years' time, this Bangladeshi mosque, you might be the imam. That's how it's supposed to be. It's not, you know what I mean? And the lack of that clearly echoes the source of the problems, which is it's not about true inclusion, and it's about there is a difference that we wish to maintain. Whereas Allah says in the Quran, bow down with those who bow down. Doesn't say bow down with the tall ones or the Eastern ones or the Western ones who bow down. So then one more thing to add is that we've started the Ahlul Bayt Revert community, okay, UK. And you know what? We had to. It was either that or have an Islamic death, man. Simple. Because you can't keep... after the honeymoon period and the first few years and whatever, for a lot of people, they just couldn't take it no more. It's heartbreaking. And we have to do something to change that. And the ARC is what our organisation is called. We are creating a template and a model that is exportable to other cities and countries. Because I've found the same issues with my New York brothers and sisters, and LA, Washington, Trinidad, Jamaica, Brazil. It's the same issues, okay? So just like the gender issues have been there for hundreds of years, has to be faced, has to be tackled, has to be confronted, and has to be done logically and clearly with strong argument, because it is not Islamic to have men up here and women down here, or to empower these people and disempower these ones. This is not Islamic at all. And when we look through the history of some of the great women in the early days of Islam, if you look at someone like Sayyidah Zainab, the granddaughter of the Prophet, if you read who this woman is, I think the whole world's supposed to know who this woman is. If people know who Joan of Arc is, and no other great, they're supposed to know who she is. But it's another one of those things where maybe let's keep these incredible, powerful women, leaders of their time, let's keep them quiet, let's obscure them from history. And it's a travesty, and it's a crime. And it has to be confronted, or it will never change.
Thank you, Khalil. It's very interesting. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Assalamu alaikum.